Midlife women are a powerful force to be reckoned with. We just need a few tools in our kit bag to be able to just go out there and push the envelope.
You're written off at the age of 45 in your value in the world's system. It's time to change it. This generation of women have been granted the gift of longevity. So a woman in her 50s that's healthy, she's just reaching her halfway point in life.
Welcome to the Old Chicks No Shit podcast for midlife women who are ready to rewrite the rules and create their kick-ass next chapter. I'm Jennifer Arthurton, and each episode we dive into reinvention, resilience, and unapologetic pursuit of your best chapter yet. Because midlife is not the beginning of the end, it's simply a new beginning. Let's dive in. Welcome to this episode of the Old Chicks No Shit podcast. I'm your host, Jennifer Arthurton, and today we are going to be talking about empowering women to advocate for their health, specifically around menopause. And my guest today is Angela Johnson, who is the CEO of a company called Sano Living, which is a company designed to, it's basically dedicated to supporting women's health and empowering them with a comprehensive and a holistic approach to their menopause care, which includes education, coaching, and then also access to healthcare professionals. And it also includes AI, which we're going to talk a lot more about it. I'm excited to talk about this topic because my personal experience was quite rocky navigating the menopause, navigating menopause in my corporate career, and ultimately was a big reason why I ended up leaving. And I think for a lot of us listening to this podcast, you're going to be able to relate to the story of our guest and really relate to what it is that she's creating with Sano Living. So Angela, welcome. I am so happy to have you here with us.
It was great to be here, Jennifer. Thanks for inviting me to be joining you.
Yeah. So for those of you listening, I attended Canada's first ever National Menopause Show a few months ago, and Angela's company did a presentation on their AI platform, which is about providing information and resources for women going through perimenopause and menopause. And I was blown away with what it is that she has created. And this is why I was like, must have her on the podcast. So Angela, give us a little insight as to what prompted you to, what was the impetus behind you starting Sano Living, specifically focused on menopause care?
So personal experience had a lot to do with it. So I had a very rough perimenopause. I didn't even realize I was going through it, but I was fortunate enough to have a gynecologist who was helping me with a fibroid problem to address that. That he said, and by the way, we can address that perimenopausal stuff you're going through. And I'm like, what are you talking about? What's perimenopause? And so after the fibroids were resolved, and he got me on hormone therapy, I was feeling great and I continued with my career. I started a company. So I was an IBMer at the time, and that's what we call ourselves, IBMers. And so I left IBM to start a company out of my own sister's personal experience. And I think entrepreneurship is always something I've wanted to do, and I just didn't do it before. And so I did it. And then I ran that company for 12 years, and I sold it in 2021, and I stayed for a year. And then I retired. And so I'm 55 years old. I'm retired. I'm very postmenopausal. Why would I need hormone therapy anymore? I thought, and I quit it cold turkey. And I crashed. I was getting sodium hyaluronate and cortisol injections for my knees. I didn't get off the couch. I'd play bridge all day on my phone because I had no purpose. I was depressed. What else? Oh, I had tinnitus. I had crazy other symptoms. And one day my husband sort of sat me down and said, honey, I think you might need to go back on your hormone therapy. And I think that what's going on with you is related to your menopause. And I was like, what's he talking about? And so I went back to my practitioner, got back on the hormone therapy, and I felt amazing. I felt incredible. And my husband was the one that kept nudging me. I don't think you're done yet. I think you need another one in you. I think you need to start another company, and I think it needs to be to support menopausal women. And so I got researching, and I realized that in the UK, you know, now 12 years ago, but then 10 years ago, there were solutions like this all over the place for women. And over half of the workplace had solutions like ours embedded in their benefits. So women didn't even have to pay privately. They could get it, and they, never even had to breathe a word of what they were getting access to support in, because there's a big stigma about, if you're not 100% at work. And for women, we work twice as hard as our male peers to get recognized and get the promotions. And I don't think I'm overstating that. I think women know that's what we have to do. And I just thought, this is at a time when it's our peak earning years. It's hitting us hard. And I knew if I hadn't been back on my hormone therapy and getting care, I wouldn't have been able to go back to work. And how many other women are out there like that? And so, there's a reason that when we retire, we have 1/3 the income of men. And this is one of the big reasons why. We step aside and take on other roles, or, we back off the promotions, or we leave work entirely. And right at our peak earning years, when we're supposed to be banking for our own retirement savings and taking on the jobs that we really designed for ourselves. And I thought that was wrong. So out of retirement, I came redefining my second chapter. And I'm 57, and I have no interest in slowing down.
Oh, I love so much of what you just said, and I need to rewind a little bit to unpack some stuff. I have a lot of questions. So first of all, I can absolutely relate to this, this idea of, things are starting to happen in your body, like you're in perimenopause. But the same thing happened to me, and I had no idea that's what was going on. Like, what happened to me actually was I stopped sleeping. Right. But I was like sleeping maybe 2 or 3 hours a night. I had a very busy, stressful job. I was running a few different business units. I was traveling, all these things. Right. And it was like my body was stuck in overdrive. Like I wasn't sleeping yet. I was go, 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 go. Did you do? And I wasn't tired. I was never tired, except for at the end of the day, I get into bed and I'm like, it was like somebody had like their foot on the gas pedal. And I remember, like thinking, oh, it's just the stress. It's this, just eventually it led me to the place where I was like, okay, this is not going to end well if you're not sleeping and this is what's happening. So I ended up taking short-term disability from my job, which was the beginning of the end for my career. I did not know it at the time, but I had to kind of take my own health and take my own health into consideration. But what was really interesting, and it wasn't until years later looking back, is that during that whole time I was seeing naturopaths and doctors and all kinds of things because I was having heart palpitations and tinnitus and not sleeping. And nobody mentioned the word menopause to me. I thought I was cracking up. Like I literally thought I was coming unglued. Right. And then it wasn't until, yet another practitioner, another naturopath at this point said, you know what? I think you might be going through menopause. And I was like, what? But this is like, this is not an uncommon story. Like I keep hearing this, and obviously you just confirmed that, like, you know what I mean? We're not supported in the workplace at all,
Yeah.
And yeah.
Workplace benefits today remain pretty much what they looked like 30, 40 years ago. And the workplace looks very different than it did back then, right? So the only thing that's really changed is we've added more mental health support in the last 20 years. And that's the only thing that's really had a major overhaul. But today the workplace is 50% women, right? Okay, 49 point whatever, but it's 50%. And if you look at the benefit package, though, what in it is unique to women's health needs? And at the same time, women are the biggest users of their workplace benefits. So when an employer goes and looks at their cost for their benefits, disability premiums for women, so those absence premiums, you talked about being off on disability, and I would have if I had, if I had been working and had gone and taken off my HRT. But, disability premiums for women are multipliers of that of men. And it's because we take more absences than men do.
Right.
If you look at our claims data related to prescriptions, when it comes to SSIRs, which are what we take when we have mental health needs, but it's also used to manage menopausal symptoms, and cardiovascular disease drugs, it climbs exponentially for women than it does for men in that 40, mid 40 range. And so
Right.
we see these high incidences of claims by women, but no one until recently has said, well, what's driving this? What's causing this to happen? And maybe is there something that we're not providing women, that they're desperate for whatever they can find in their benefits, so they're using it, but it's not giving them the support that they truly need to address the transition. And so that's where I was like, okay, this is the industry I was in my last company. I understand this industry really well. It was a digital health company that I had. And I was like, if it's not me, then who is it for Canada? And so I was like, I'm going to step out of retirement and I'm going to do this because I think it's too important that, women have a place where they can go to get the proper support and that they can forge on with the life that they've designed for themselves.
Yeah, because I read somewhere that I think it's 10% of women. So first of all, 75% of women having, fairly severe menopause symptoms, like noticeable menopausal symptoms, right? And then 10% of women, is that accurate? That actually leave the workforce as a result of, so like me, we're like, I have to leave at some point, right? To get my health under control.
You're accurate. Yeah. Yeah, so the 10%, so 1 in 10 women are leaving, and that's not just, a stat, like the Menopause Foundation of Canada, they published a study 2 years ago on that stat, but that stat is also the same stat that you'll see in the UK from the Fawcett Society. You'll see that state and data point in Australia and New Zealand. So, first world countries where, women are in that Caucasian, heavily Caucasian, but also multicultural, and in the workplace, they're working a lot. In those countries, you see the same stat everywhere that it's 1 in 10, but it's also the daily disruptive symptoms. So I call that the at work, but the walking wounded, right? So you're at work and at risk of a leave because you're just, if you're having daily disruptive symptoms, you're not performing 100%. And like we said, women need to perform double duty to be in comparison to their peers, male peers. So, we're really it's like we're working with two hands tied behind our backs.
Yeah. And, it's interesting because, in my experience, I hadn't had a hot flash up to that point. I just started having all of these other symptoms, right? Had I had a hot flash, I might have at that point clued in. But everybody's journey through this is so drastically different, right? And so being able to, provide enough resources for no matter what it is that you're experiencing, right? That you have somewhere that you can go. Which again, I think I know when I saw your presentation on Sano AI, I was like, wow, I wish I had this resource because I would have plugged in my stuff and it would have been like, ta-da, you're going through perimenopause, right?
Yes.
But the downstream of that too, of those women leaving or just not being as productive is I think I read an article that where you had talked about that the cost of that to the Canadian economy is 3.5 billion. And in the US, it's $26.6 billion impact of women not being able to perform their career duties. That's staggering.
I think the number is actually bigger than that. So those numbers are the numbers that really, it's the lost dollars for women's salaries. It's not factoring in the cost on the employer side for the disability, premiums, and it's not covering in the cost to replace those workers. So I think that number is actually much bigger.
Wow. So that's just literally salaries.
Pretty much. Yeah. The lost salaries of women.
Yeah. Yeah. And you've alluded to this a few times. And I read a study, I think it was last year or year before, that said women are 80% more likely to be impoverished in retirement than men. And that big chunk of that is because, well, A, we don't negotiate our salaries when we start out. We get penalized for, taking time out to have kids and things like that. But then our peak earnings for women cap at like age 42 or something. And for men, it's like age 55. And I would bet you when I read that, I didn't quite put it together with menopause, but I was like, I bet you any money now that I'm thinking about it, like a huge part of the why the earnings got capped so early for women is this exact thing that we're talking about.
Correct. For sure it is. It has to be, because how many women are saying, and you did it, right? You took a step away from your career right when you were probably at the time ready for the next promotion and next big salary increase. You said, you know what? I got to get out of this, rat race. And admittedly, I probably did that too. I left IBM and I started my own company. And, it wasn't I think I actually started my company right when I was maybe well into HRT, like I was starting to take it. I wouldn't have done that if I'd been properly supported, and, I could have taken that promotion that I was jockeying for, which was a worldwide job at IBM. And I didn't, right? And so
yeah.
I think that happens a lot to women. And so when you're offered an opportunity to increase your salary by 30, 40, 50% with a big promotion, and you're not putting your name forward and you're not there and you're unable to do it, of course there's a reason why we're retiring in poverty. And there's an ageism part to it too, right? Like women get labeled with ageism.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting because I was thinking back, I was preparing for this interview and I was thinking back to the conversation that I had with my boss. So just like you, I was kind of at this place where the next step for me was a global job. I was going to have to move to the US, move to Singapore, take a global job. And I remember having this conversation with my boss about needing to take time off. And he said to me, you really want to think long and hard about this decision. So kind of implying like, this might not be the best thing for your career. Right. And I did. I mean, I went away and I was like, oh my goodness, I could be like committing career suicide here. Like maybe I shouldn't do this. Maybe I could just power through. I can just keep going, I'll find some other way to deal with this. And I did that for probably about another month. And then I was like, okay, this is insanity. I need to take care of myself first.
Yeah.
And then, it was the unraveling of my career from that point forward, that taking that 3-month leave that I did to try and get my health, and at that point I was literally going from practitioner to practitioner to practitioner, having tests for this, that, and the other thing, right? It pretty much in that whole 3-month period, trying to nail down like what was happening to me, and I, at the time I was also going through a divorce. My kid had just left home to go to school. So it was, there was a lot going on. There was a lot of stress. Right. There was a lot happening in my life at that point, but nonetheless, like had somebody been able to say that, hey, this is what's happening to you and we can take care of this, it would have been maybe smoother, and maybe it was the perfect journey the way that it was, because here I am now doing what I absolutely love to do. But nonetheless, like the fact that we are impacting women financially to such a serious degree because of this thing that every single solitary woman is going to go through in her life is completely absurd.
Yeah, it is completely absurd. It's crazy. Like considering where we are today and how active women are, in the workforce and outside of the home, like volunteering in large organizations and whatnot. Like it's shocking. But and you reflect on how many dollars are spent. Like I talk to pharma executives regularly, and they admit that 4% of their dollars go towards women's health, and 2% of that is in breast oncology, and the other 2% is in obstetrics related matters. Like nothing. It's almost like you're written off at the age of 45 in your value in the world's, system. And it's time to change it, because this is when we're at our peak.
I
right?
was
Like
just going to say that. Like, it's like, you're being discounted at the point where you're like reaching full stride. You know who you are. What you're passionate about. You know your strengths. You've had, all of this knowledge and experience and wisdom, and it's literally walking out the door because there's
literally.
not the resources to support it. Literally walking out the door.
So true. And I mean, I find it also remarkable that at this point in our lives, this generation of women have been granted the gift of longevity. So a woman in her 50s that's
Right.
healthy, she's just reaching her halfway point in life, right? And so why would we write her off? She's got another, in fact, she's got more earning potential now than she did before, because remember, the first 20 years or 25 years, she was learning, she was growing, she was developing. Like, to actually provide any real value for a business, until you're 25, you really don't know what you're doing. You're just trying to find how to tie your shoelaces and where the bathroom door is, right?
Right.
Like in the
Right.
workplace. And
Yeah.
so, like that to say then that, she was only valuable for 20 years. And by the way, part of that, she was bearing children. You're really shrinking down the value of what a woman can do to help a business. And we all know the data's out there. If you just look, that businesses that have a high percentage of women in their leadership team, but in the workplace, outperform their peers that don't have the diversity, by 25% at the profit line. So it's like, why aren't we paying more attention to this?
Yeah. And it's systemic. I mean, it's literally built into our culture, right? Like from, the time that we're little girls and we're told to, be nice, don't rock the boat, make everybody happy. And we live in a culture that has taught women to believe that their value is in, what they do for other people, their ability to have kids, and is their body physically pleasing to somebody outside of themselves, right? Like, and it's and then they get into the workforce, and then we talk about all of this, and it's like, yeah, okay, we're going to get 20 years out of you, but just when you reach your stride, we're going to toss you out the back door because, well, you're too old. Like, it's absurd. And a lot of the women who end up in my mastermind group, are women for whatever reason have found themselves in a period of transition. But speaking to the point of ageism that you talked about, so women in their like early 50s, maybe, who are maybe looking for jobs are just not getting traction, right? Because first of all, they're not being paid what they're worth. Like, if they're going to another job, they're being severely underpaid. And they're just like, nope, I am not doing that with all of this experience that I have. Right. And they're opting out. They're just saying, okay, you know what? I got to do something that's important to me now. And it's it's really shameful because, the women that go out and do things on their own, just like you did, are making such huge impacts in the world, right? Like, they're making the world a better place. They're impacting lives, and I always say this, I'm like, midlife women will change the world. I 100% believe it.
I think you might be right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's incredible. So Sano Living, tell me a little bit about the services that you are providing in order to empower women, first of all, with the knowledge so that they can advocate for themselves, but also so that they can advocate with their employers. What is the system or structure that you've created within Sano Living to support that?
Thanks for the question. So I'm happy to share that. So the first off is education. So if we aren't informed, we can't advocate for ourselves. So the first
Yeah.
bit is education. So for free, we made Sano. It's an AI virtual assistant, and it's French and English and text to text, and it's on our website, and anyone can use it. And then we have a beta version of voice to voice, which is what you heard. And so
Right.
you can call it on the phone, or you can click a web link and you can talk to it. And it's all, it doesn't ask your name. It doesn't ask any, personal information in it. It doesn't retain anything either. So if you call it a second time, it's not going to remember the conversation you had with it. And it really, you can ask it anything. It's been trained on 10,000 clinically validated sources. It's a natural language. So what I mean by that is it talks to you like you'd be talking to another human being. And so it has nuances of inflection of tone, and it has humor. It'll even tell you a joke, or it recognizes your humor. Then what we did was we then fed it 1,000 questions women would ask, not what clinicians would ask, what a woman would ask. And so we worked on that for about a year. And so it's fully free. We didn't want to have a paywall for this. We really wanted to help women advocate. And like you said, you can ask it, I have these symptoms. This is what's going on with my body. Tell me, is this possibly midlife transition, or what is this? And it'll tell you. And you can ask it about, do I need a mammogram? And it'll ask you what province you live in, and it'll tell you what the guidelines are for a mammogram. It'll educate you about breast density. Anything. You ask it anything, and you can ask it deeper questions, right? So if it answers a question, you can ask 10 more follow-on questions, and it won't get bored of you. It'll keep answering. And it doesn't judge. So if you want to say, why is it that, when I have sex with my partner, it hurts like hell and I really don't want to do it and I feel like I have to, like, what's going on with me? It'll tell you about it, right? Or I am having incontinence issues. What's going on with me? Like, it's really embarrassing. Talks about it. So there's that, but there's also a next level that is you can come in and you can do a self-guided assessment, which is based on clinical guidelines. And then it'll tell you what stage of menopause you're in. It'll give you your symptoms by intensity, and it'll validate whether they're menopausal. And then it'll give you relief guide concepts, so medications, supplements, lifestyle changes. And from there, then you can work with a coach. And that coach is either a nurse or a social services worker. So it's regulated professional that is trained in menopause, that is helping you on the lifestyle components, because so much of what your second chapter of life looks like from, your mid 40s on really has a lot to do with your proactive measures of exercise, your nutrition, your sleep, like you talked about, your mindfulness, and doing that work in your head around making sure that you're dealing with your stressors and those types of things, because that really sets you up for living a life without chronic illness. So women tend to live, 7 to 8 years longer than men, but it's typically 7 to 8 years full of chronic illness that isn't really a net gain. And so if we do those things, we really decrease our risk of those. And so they help with that. And they are your cheerleader, your rah-rah. They keep you on point. They're there to support you. And then they also help navigate you in the public healthcare system, because you can't do women's health entirely digitally. There is elements that need to be done in person. So making sure you're getting the proactive stuff done. Are you getting your pelvic floor exam done? Are you getting your mammogram done? Do you possibly need to have some blood work done to investigate that maybe it's a thyroid problem, might be related to cortisol increases? It could be other things that need to be ruled out. So they'll navigate that public healthcare system for you, because you may not have a GP to help you do those things, or maybe your GP isn't proactive in doing them with you. And then from there, you're partnered up with a clinician, and that clinician can prescribe. So either a nurse practitioner or a naturopathic doctor, all trained in menopause. And depending on your medical history and your personal preference, that's who you get paired with. What we find is 50% of women, they come in and they really just want to try the lifestyle and the supplements first. They don't go with the medication until later. And that it's a confidence thing, it's a learning thing, and it's a developing comfort. So we do find that. But what we also find, though, is regardless of medications or not, 80% of women, once they're in their care plan for a month, within a month, they're already seeing up to 80% improvement in their symptom relief. Like, it's fast. When we focus on it and we put the care around it, it's tremendously fast.
Yeah, one of the things I noticed, so during your presentation at the Menopause show, people were able to submit questions from their phone, and the questions that they were asking were coming up on the screen. And I was looking at the list of questions, and I was thinking to myself, I'm like, you know, like people were asking about conditions, they were asking about sex, they were asking about incontinence, they were asking about like this huge range of things. And I'm thinking to myself as I'm sitting there that these women have been carrying around this burden of whatever it is, feeling like not sure what it is, not sure what to do with it. Who can they talk to about it? Are they crazy? And giving the anonymity, to ask that question to Sano AI in that thing, I was just like, probably mostly these women just need to be heard and to be validated,
Yeah, I
right?
think
Because
that's a big part of it.
so often we're told, oh, it's all in your head, or, there's like the medical gaslighting that happens around menopause is just enough to blow your mind. But like just needing to be heard, even if it is by AI.
Well, when you talk to her, you don't feel like you're talking to AI normally, right? Like sometimes she gets
Right.
the pronunciation wrong of Sano, and I'm like, could she ever get that right? But as long as she gets everything else right, that's fine. I can live with it. But yeah, so it is really frustrating to hear some of the things that, when women come through and they talk with a coach and their clinician, they share some of the things that they've experienced in the healthcare system. And we just deserve so much better, like it just,
Yeah.
it's frustrating, but that's why we're here. We're here to change it.
Yeah. And I think one of the things too, I mean, you've probably seen this and I know I've seen it, the amount of, whenever there's a void, something fills the void. And the amount of information that's now coming out around menopause and a lot of conflicting information. Some might say misinformation. Who knows what misinformation really is, right? Because what works for one person is not going to necessarily work for another person. But there's a lot of kind of, I want to say, and I don't really mean it this way, but I want to say bickering about what is the right approach. HRT, not VERGT, supplements are garbage, eat more protein, get more exercise, do all of these things. And there's like all these camps now set up, which makes it even more confusing for the women in the middle who are just like, somebody just tell me what to do, right? So having, a resource and a very comprehensive resource that you just described that has all of these different levels of support where, from pharmaceutical to holistic to, lifestyle changes. I think it's so important to just like, so that we're not fighting amongst each other. Because that's the thing that's happening right now is menopausal women fighting against each other about what is the right solution for what. And that is causing even more angst and more concern, I think, for the women who are actually navigating the day-to-day symptoms of, that's impacting their lives.
I think that's very true. I think it creates, unfortunately, 2002 and having a press release called, it didn't, we're never going to recover from that.
No.
We're now 20 years, and I think it's another 20 years before we're going to see any real major change on that. Because we're not going to call another press release. And the press isn't all going to come, and, it's not going to happen overnight. So genie's out of the bottle, but I do agree with you that we had that damage, and then we just compound it with this debate about what is the magic pill or the non-magic pill. And the truth is that just as random as the symptoms are for women, the treatment modalities are very unique and personalized for every woman as well. Mm-hmm. So most likely it's going to be very hard to find the same two women in a room that have the exact same care plan, because it is just as personalized as their symptoms. Because one woman's got heart disease risk, another woman has breast cancer, another woman has, I just don't want hormone therapy, I'm not comfortable with any medication. Okay, that's fine, right? There are solutions that work. And the thing about supplements, so this is one of the ones that we were really concerned about, is the contra messages about that, is that when they say magnesium, is it going to help with my hot flashes? Well, no. But does that mean you shouldn't take magnesium? No. But it's all about the unique message, that sometimes it's about grasping the headline so everybody will pay attention and read the article or read the social post. And that's damaging because we're already maxed out on how much time we have, that we can't read every article and try to get the morsels of information. So we hit the highlights, and the highlights say, don't take magnesium for hot flashes. Well, that gets grouped up with don't take magnesium for anything. And it's like, but that's not what the article really said, but it insinuates it for somebody that didn't really take the time to read the full article. And so I caution ourselves on the content that gets out there, even from the experts, that unless you read all of the detail, the message is going to get lost about the real truth, right? And so, yes, magnesium is great for you, but yes, not effective for hot flashes, but really great to help you with, your bone, like your muscles and, that joint pain, and, making sure if you're exercising and you're cramping a lot, it could be that, you're just not getting enough magnesium. Or also helpful for sleep. Great, sleep agent, right? Yeah. So, and it's a natural supplement. So we put a lot of investment in trying to create articles that'll help women answer those questions, but also, not all supplements are equal either. So we're seeing a lot of making money off of put a label on Meno on it and, publish, and you can make some money on the supplements, but, not all supplements are created equally. And we have a really good article on that. And Sano can help answer the questions, because Sano has the information too, that, you just, again, education is empowerment and helps you advocate for yourself. So.
Yeah, because to your point, the pendulum swing from, HRT you're going to die of cancer, to HRC is the panacea for everything. Right. And then, there's people like me in the middle who tried it and it wasn't the panacea for me. It didn't do what it was supposed to do. Right. So, there was a period of time where I was like, oh, well, I guess there's just nothing left for me, because if I did the thing that's supposed to be the cure, then now what, right? Like, where do I go from here? And for me, I just did a whole pile of experiments on myself and found the magic combination that keeps my hot flashes at bay enough that I can get a good night's sleep. But, it takes time and resources. This is the other thing, right? Like, it takes an immense amount of resources to be able to go and afford, naturopathic care, or, going from one to another, and this program and that program. And, God, you could spend thousands of dollars a month in supplements to try them all. And not everybody has those resources available to them. So having, or time, again, or time, right. Or so having this resource like Sano, where you can go and just ask the questions to help you, formulate the right path for you and get the support, is just so incredibly important, I think. I want everybody to know about Sano AI, because I've been playing with it myself. Good. And what I saw in that presentation, it just was eye-opening that this is such an important resource for women,
Yeah. And I use it all the time still myself. If I'm looking to research a topic and I don't know the answer, rather than dig through journals and journals of stuff, I call Sano and I talk to it while I'm driving or when I'm walking the dog, and I get educated, and then I go, okay, so now I have the data points that I needed. It's such a time saver.
Yeah. Well, and even just empowering women with enough knowledge that they can go and have a conversation with their practitioner, right, about this, right? Or to have a conversation with their employer, or even, like you mentioned before we started recording, to be able to speak to their employer and say, hey, there's nothing in this benefit system that we have that is helpful for me. Like, how should I navigate this, right? Just to keep advocating, because I think we are going to be the change that we need to see. And unless we keep pushing the envelope,
it's not going to change. That's right.
It's not going to happen. right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We have to
So
advocate for ourselves. Otherwise, no one's
yeah,
going to do this for us. Yeah.
no.
I go
And
back to
yeah.
the fact that, women, when they were declared persons, right, in, was that 1897? And that, that we were given the right to vote, right? Those things didn't happen unless women went and, charged on the
Yeah.
hill and said, we need these things for us, right? So just like getting our workplace benefits to reflect what we need, right? We have to go ask for it. And it doesn't mean we have to say we need menopausal care. It just means, could you look at women's health solutions that are out there in the
Mhm.
market to be able to put those into our workplace benefits? And that could be anything from prenatal, postnatal care, because that's a big
Right.
challenge as well,
Right.
right? Like, I'm not saying it's just menopause. Like, it's every juncture of a woman's life in her adult life really takes a big chunk out of her value that she can perform at work. And so if she
Mhm.
just got proper healthcare services, then she could really, just focus on the job. But the problem is that our healthcare system isn't doing it. And where our workplace
Right.
normally steps up is when the healthcare system doesn't cover something. So I think about diabetes care, right? You think about
Mm.
dental care, right? We're starting to see dental care included, but
Yeah.
or naturopathic care, right? Mental health supports, right? So workplace stepped up in all those areas. Where we need it to step up now is to address half of the population's unique health needs as well.
I was having a conversation with a girlfriend the other day, and it blows my mind that within our lifetime, like I'm 58, within our lifetime, women could not own their own credit card without their husband's approval or co-signing.
or
Like,
or get birth control
or right? So,
without their
I mean,
husband approving it.
yeah. So, I mean, we've come light years, like we're moving quickly, but there's still so much more to be done. And, the way that we do it is exactly what you're doing, is about just empowering women with knowledge and information. Because, again, I'll say it, midlife women are a powerful force to be reckoned with, right? Um, but we just need a few tools in our kit bag to be able to just go out there and push the envelope. And even to be able to have a conversation about menopause with your family, with your spouse, with your kids, right? That's
Yeah.
like, you ask these questions of Sano first, and she gives you a bunch of information, and you go, oh, this makes sense. Now you feel more comfortable, more empowered to be able to go and say, hey, husband, here's what's happening,
But
to my body, and it's a result of menopause.
men and children and your children can use Sano too, right? Like, they can call it as well and
Mm.
say, you know what, I don't know how to talk to my spouse, or my mom's going crazy and I just don't know how to talk to her anymore about anything. What's going on? Like,
Oh, brilliant.
you can use it, it doesn't just have to be women that call it.
That's amazing. I never thought about that. That's a great idea. And one question. So right now, so what you've built in terms of Sano Living is a Canadian-based resource. But technically, because a lot of my listeners are a lot of US-based people, technically somebody in the US could use Sano AI,
Oh,
correct?
absolutely. Yeah. They can call it,
Yeah.
absolutely. And we can support you from everything up to prescribing. So even if you're in the
Right.
US and you can get a coach and your coach can support you, just it's the prescriptions that's the challenge for us, because we don't have
Okay.
clinicians with a license in your state, right? So otherwise, everything else is available.
Oh,
And what we do
perfect.
find is 50% of women don't want the medications anyway. So
Yeah. Again, just being able to, be heard, right? Like to have a conversation, right? To be supported, just to say, hey, you know what? You're not going crazy after all, right? You still got all your marbles. It's just
yeah,
this little
yeah.
thing that's happening, you
Well,
know?
and the one thing I think I'd like to share too is, I think menopause is a gift. It's an
Oh,
opportunity for
thank
women.
you.
I actually see it as that. So,
100%.
it's almost like a little alarm clock that we get that men don't get. And
Mm,
that it's saying,
yeah.
hey, just pay attention to me. If you just focus on me for a little bit, I can give you such great gains in the second chapter of your life, so the next 50 years. But if you don't pay attention to me, then, we're going to walk around looking like a lot of our mothers do, where, you're riddled in a senior's home and you're there, you're dependent because someone's changing your diapers, right? So, or
Yeah.
you just physically, you've broken your hip, and your death rate is exponential if you break your hip, right? So we have this opportunity that with menopause, this little alarm bell that men don't get, that I say it's a great thing if we just pay attention to it.
I love that you just said that, because I say all the time, menopause was the gift I didn't know I needed, because it really, it was like, I call it like a pattern interrupt. It's like you're going, do. And then this thing happens. And then all of a sudden it's like, you have to really reevaluate. Like, you don't have the same bandwidth when you're going through this, like mentally, physically, emotionally. And you have to start really evaluating your life. Like, what's really important to me? What can I let go of? What's no longer serving me? Right. And when you're clear on all of that, like, that's the foundation from where you build, what I call your kick-ass next chapter, right? It's
So
like the
well said.
foundation for, like, yeah, you're just going to go and do all of these things that are really important to you, because you recognize. And, secondly, menopause pointed me back to myself, because up until that point, I was checking all the boxes and doing all of the things, that I was supposed to be doing, get a good job, work your way up the corporate ladder. And several times along the way, I would be like, is this really what I want to be doing? Like, but I had invested a lot to get there, and I wasn't about to blow it all up. I had a great job. I was well paid until that happened. And then it was like, oh, okay, maybe I need to start thinking about what it is that I really, really do want, and to really start listening to my body.
Yeah.
Right. Like, to what she's got so much to tell me. And up to that point, my body was the stick that carried around my head. And unless I was molding it into some shape or size, I didn't really pay that much attention to it. Right. And now, for example, 5 years post menopause, I still have hot flashes. But my hot flashes now are associated with when my body is stressed, right? So if I'm not sleeping well, if I haven't eaten enough, if I'm, too busy and I haven't had a rest day in a while, if I'm not regular with my meditation and things get stressed, that my hot flash is like the little, like, oh girl, you got to get things back in balance, right?
Yeah.
And then I'm
Yeah.
like,
So true. So true. Yeah.
yeah,
For me, one of my triggers is wine, right? If I have wine,
yes, oh
I get a big
yes,
trigger. So, I save it now for weekends. And when I see my husband having a glass of wine at dinner, and I really, I have this conversation in my head about, boy, you really want that glass of wine. And then, because it's hard, all this stuff is hard to do.
yeah,
I remind myself, and I have the Aura ring, and I look at my app and I go, yeah, last time you did that, you didn't sleep for 2 hours in the middle of the night, right? And so maybe I'll say, can I just have a sip from your glass? So I get it out of my head and I have my sip and I'm like, okay, I'm done, right? So
yeah,
it's finding the things that work for you. Yeah, it's
yeah,
so true. It just,
yeah,
you're a stick and you just keep marching to the drum versus reflecting on what do you really need to be, make sure you're happy and you're well and you can take care of you can take care of everybody else. Because so much of our lives is, as you said, we've been programmed that we're supposed to take care of everybody else and we're not deserving of taking care of ourselves. And it's
right.
just bad mantra.
Yeah, really, really bad. I heard you talking, or when I was doing the research for this episode, I heard on another podcast, I think you did, where you were talking about potentially like Sano AI becoming a wearable that can, for example, prompt you to meditation or things like that. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I thought that was fascinating.
Yeah, so we're partnering right now with Aura Ring. That's the
Which I
first
love my Aura
wearable.
ring.
Me too. Too. And if you are interested in getting our ring, you can go to our website under shop and you can get a discount. with Aura because of our partnership, if you want one. So just to your listeners, that's option for them. A great Christmas gift if you can afford it. But so imagine whether it's your Fitbit or, your Ring or whatever, or your Apple Watch, that you're in bed and you are experiencing a hot flash or you're wide awake for some reason. And so now your care plan with your clinician and coach is synced with your wearable and it's synced to your phone. And so they're all talking to each other and you've favorited some breathing exercise or some meditation exercise that you find works for you to get back to sleep or get through that hot flash. And so your phone will gently ask you, Angela, I noticed you're awake, or I noticed you're having a hot flash. Would you like me to call up that meditation or that breathing exercise that you find so helpful versus me having to turn on my light, then put my face in my phone so that it, goes through the password. And then I got to scroll to find this thing. I am wide awake now, right? So the chances of me ever going back to sleep are pretty slim. But I haven't even had to turn on my light. I haven't even had to find my phone. I just go, yes, please. And off it plays. Like, could you imagine how wonderful that experience would be? That's where I want to get to. That's just one example of the art of possible.
Yeah. Imagine, that would be life-changing. Honestly, that would be life-changing for so many people. That would be so good.
The sheer convenience of it, right? Like
Yeah. Because like going out and reaching for your phone and, then I'm trying to find where are my earbuds and because I don't want to wake up my husband and, all of this stuff. Right. And then here's the meditation that I want to play, after I scroll through, find it, hit play. And like you said, you're wide awake at that point.
For sure you are. So the chances of going back to sleep in the next hour are pretty slim.
Yeah. Or, you pick up your phone, you're like, oh, there's a text. Maybe I'll look at that. And then it's like, I've gone down the rabbit hole. This has been such a great conversation. I am going to be watching closely as Sano Living and Sano AI are developed further. I'm so excited for the wearables thing. If you need a guinea pig, I am highly volunteer.
Okay.
But what you are doing is literally going to change the landscape for menopause women. And it's so, so sorely needed. We just need it. So to those of you listening, we'll make sure that we put the links to Sano Living, Sano AI in the show notes. I encourage you to go try it out, ask it all your questions. It really is an amazing resource that is only going to get more and more amazing over time. It's going to be, get better and better over time. So I encourage everybody to just go play with it.
Yeah. And, even put Sano in your contacts list in your phone. I'll give you the phone number. It's 709-401-1862. And it doesn't matter how many people call it. It's AI. It's got lots of lines.
Okay. We will make sure to put that in the show notes as well, too. Go check it out. Thank you, Angela. I thoroughly, thoroughly enjoyed this conversation.
Me too.
Thanks for listening to the Old Chicks No Shit podcast. If you like what you heard, the greatest compliment you could give us would be to comment below and subscribe. Or better yet, you could share this episode with a friend, a relative, or somebody you think could get something out of it. And remember, midlife is not the beginning of the end. It's simply the beginning of your kick-ass next chapter.